Сайн байцгаана уу хүн үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр манай de facto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Станфордын их сургуулийн профессор Жэффри Глэнн оролцож байна.
Жэффри Глэнн Америк нэгдсэн улсын Станфордын их сургуулийн профессор. Тэрээр анх Беркли дэх Калифорни их сургуульд биохимийн чиглэлээр бакалаврын зэрэгээ дүүргэжээ. Хожим биохим, биофизикийн чиглэлээр магистрын болоод докторийн зэрэгээ Сан Франциско дах Калифорни их сургуульд хамгаалсан байна. Профессор Глэнн судалгааны лаборатори удирдан ажилладаг бөгөөд түүндээ вирусыг молекулын түвшинд судалж олж авсан мэдээллүүдтэй вирусын эсрэг тэмцэх шинэ арга олохтой туршиж байна. Уг лаборатори нь гепатитын болоод элэгний вирусыг голчлон судалдаг юм.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So tell us what brought you to Mongolia.
Well, it's interesting. I've been studying for 30 years hepatitis viruses and liver cancer. And one day somebody came into my office and said, I think we have a problem with Delta. Can you please come to Mongolia? And so I came and discovered an unbelievable problem that you're burdened with in this country. And I came for the hepatitis D, which is the worst form of human viral hepatitis, but then found out there's also a huge problem of hepatitis C and a huge problem of liver cancer. In fact, you have the highest rate of liver cancer in the world.
Why does that happen?
I think it's driven by these hepatitis viruses, and in particular the hepatitis D, which we've also now discovered you have also among one of the highest rates in the world. In my country, about 6% of people who have hepatitis B also have D. In this country, we just completed a study in collaboration with Mongolian colleagues. 60% of the people with B also have D. And that's probably driving the high rate of liver cancer, because that virus we know accelerates liver disease.
Where is it coming from? How happened that Mongolia has this unique?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this virus is present everywhere, but
D and C both.
Correct. But the percentage of people with B that also have D varies. And you, unfortunately, have one of the highest rates in the world. And we don't know why, but we know it's causing devastation.
Yes.
Fortunately, I think we're on the verge of having, for the first time, some very promising new treatments that I think can make a big difference. And that's why I originally came here.
So we don't know yet clearly what is the reason. The guess is probably from the time when this the injection comes. You know, they were not using sterile injection, and everybody got some virus. The injection is when.
Yes, so we know how the virus is transmitted. Hepatitis B and hepatitis D are transmitted the same way, by blood, from blood to blood. So it can be from contaminated needles, dentistry implements. It can also be transmitted from mother to child, and it also can be transmitted sexually.
I see.
And these are the ways it's transmitted all over the world, and probably here as well.
So we have this devastation. How can we now deal with it? What is the country is doing to deal with?
Yes, unfortunately, even though hepatitis D is the worst form of human viral hepatitis, we haven't had any good treatments. But we now, I think that's changing. And one of the companies that I started is involved in bringing forward, I think, what will be some exciting new treatments for this disease.
So please tell us about this treatment, what you have created. I understand you have been doing it for the last 30 years. You have created several this sort of viruses treatments. Please tell us about that particular treatment.
Yes, so this is a very interesting treatment. The virus uses something in our body for its life cycle. And what we discovered, if we can deprive the virus access to that, we can break the virus life cycle. And so we have discovered or identified a drug that will effectively prevent the virus from using this substance that it needs from us under conditions where we're okay, but the virus isn't. And that allows us to stop the virus from being produced. And I think that that will enable people to hopefully get rid of their virus.
I understand before treating these viruses, you create the prototype of these viruses, and experimentally in lab, you either create or you destroy that, right?
That's correct.
Of the viruses.
Yes, so we've done all that work for many years. That's the work we've done to show that this type of drug is very effective at preventing viruses from being made, in particular the Delta virus from being made, in simple models of the virus, in more complex models of the virus, and even in an animal model that we made of the virus. In all those systems, this type of drug is very effective at breaking the life cycle.
And I understand you have discovered that
Yes.
complex of these viruses. How it happened? Why? And where?
Yeah, as so many things in science, sometimes it's an accident, but then you say, oh, this could be something very useful.
Was it accident?
Well, it was, I think I went to a lecture one day, and
Which year it would be?
this would have been in probably around 1990, so a long time. And I was a graduate student.
Wow.
And, but all of a sudden it became very clear that this process that was described in non-viral systems maybe could be applied to this virus.
And in the US, it takes quite some time to be allowed to use that drugs or whatever for human body.
Yes. So we were very lucky in that sense because the same process in the body that the virus uses, it was also discovered that it could be used by certain cancer cells. And for that reason, the drugs that we're using now were originally developed to treat cancer. Now, it turns out that that's probably too simplistic for cancer, but these are perfect drugs for the virus. And the reason they're perfect for the virus is because they target something in our body that the virus can't control. So that sets up a situation that makes it very hard for the virus to develop resistance to this drug. And so we did something called repurposing, where you take a drug developed for one purpose and you use it for something else. And the beauty here is that over 2,000 patients had been treated with this drug in various cancer studies. And it failed, but it failed for lack of efficacy, not toxicity. So we had a very good safety database in humans that allowed us to then go right away and test this in humans for the virus. So we saved a lot of time that way.
Yes, indeed. I understand there are type of many viruses in the world,
Yes.
but out of them only two of the viruses, D and C, if it's one category. The other is H, against the woman disease.
So there are many kinds of viruses, and some viruses share things in common. And so a drug that works against one virus could work against other related viruses.
So, by spoken that this viruses you have treated that treatment will be useful for other types?
That's a great question. Yes, I do think that this can work for other viruses that also depend on the same substance in our body. We're focusing on the Delta virus because that's where we have the most work we've done. It's the most devastating disease.
Delta viruses is coming from the D.
D, yes,
Right,
that's the D.
hepatitis
Hepatitis
D.
D and Delta virus is the same thing.
And to the certain level where almost to the level of cancer or before the Delta comes from?
So we don't fully understand why or how, but we do know if you have the hepatitis B or hepatitis C or hepatitis D, all these viruses, you have them chronically for many years, and it increases your risk of developing cancer. It looks like the D accelerates that process.
I see. So you stop the D from the
Yes.
acceleration, or
Yes.
does it completely stop, or it is just for a while stops that action, or it will be revoked again?
Yes, that's a great question, and that's what we've been studying in various clinical trials. The first one was at the NIH in the United States, and then we've done subsequent trials in Turkey, where Delta is endemic, in Germany, where there's a lot of Delta, another study at the NIH, And so these different studies with different combinations of doses tells us that there are a variety of ways to help patients with these drugs. Some patients are getting rid of the virus. Some patients will have to see with longer treatment will get rid of it. I think eventually we'll be able to benefit most patients. That's what's very exciting.
Yeah, in Mongolia this is particular warning because 60% of the population, it is so dangerous that if we don't act on, since we discovered now, we have to act upon very focused way, right?
That's why I'm here.
Yes, let's
That's
talk
why
about
this is my
program.
fourth time in Mongolia, because I believe that we have a fantastic opportunity here to make a huge difference. Obviously, commercially, Mongolia is not very important from a drug company's perspective, but impact-wise, I think it is a huge opportunity to make a big difference.
No doubt.
And we can take a situation where it's devastating to the country, but because it's a relatively small country, we can actually have a huge impact. So we can take it from a position of...
At which level this impact is going on now?
Well, so there are plans to do the first clinical studies of this drug in Mongolia, hopefully soon. And the drug needs to go through the further testing so it can eventually be approved and then made available very widely.
But in general, this drug is already available around the world.
So it's not available for sale yet. It's still being tested. But it's been tested in over 100 patients now in different clinical trials.
In here or?
Outside of Mongolia.
Okay.
In the United States.
Already, several.
In Mongolia.
Not yet.
So we have done no studies in Mongolia, but in the studies at the United States, several patients are Mongolian.
I see.
Mongolians who are living in the United States, for example, and who brought the Delta virus with them.
Well, and they discovered it there.
Yes, and then they happened to be in the United States, so they could participate in the clinical trial.
Tell us about this harmony. What is this about, and do you have any relations with that harmony?
Yes, so Harvoni has two pieces, and what makes it so special is the piece called sofosbuvir. That's a very special kind of drug.
What is the name again?
Sofosbuvir.
Okay. And
it's now sold by Gilead.
It's two types of harmonies.
There is so sofosbuvir is called it's a drug called a nucleoside analog, and that can be combined with another drug. And Harvoni is the combination of the sofosbuvir and another class of drug called an NS5A inhibitor. And together that's put into one pill, and it's made a tremendous difference. And many people now can get cured with one pill a day for 2 to 3 months treatment time.
3 months, and it's against hepatitis C.
Hepatitis C, that's correct.
And this is, I think, very successful program in this country.
It is. And so
hepatitis B, C, D.
Correct.
So the harmony is against C.
C, that's correct.
How about B?
So B is a more challenging situation. It's
in Mongolia as well.
B is a big problem in Mongolia as well, that's correct. But the innovation of the drugs against B is further behind.
I see.
We have good drugs against C. We have the next generation drugs which will be even better against C and cut the treatment time much shorter. And we have, as we discussed, some promising new drugs for D.
D. So B is staying behind.
B
now
is still
we're
harder.
fighting C and C. D is in the process of completing the whole process, right?
That's correct.
Well, it's good news and bad news. Bad news is we have so many D. Good news is you are here, there is a treatment. How is if you compare it with, say, with the history of Harvoni, the success story, the match or path, how does it go?
Well, so Harvoni is the before last chapter in the whole book of hepatitis C treatment. There were many chapters before Harvoni, and for example, hepatitis B and even hepatitis D were at earlier chapters in the book. So eventually we will have drugs hopefully as good as Harvoni for those diseases, but that's going to take time.
You know, in the 50s, I understand Mongolians, my parents' time, they were saying this disease called the yellow, just the yellow. Maybe
Yes.
probably other countries also do call it yellow.
Yes.
And they would go to hospital, they have some treatment, they would come back, but looks like not completely treatment
Correct.
were happening. And it was distributed with such a high speed so that now majority of population has this disease.
That's correct.
In this or that form. What is the best way to prevent this? How can we do something that effective that everybody understands the danger of this disease?
Yeah, so
and
that's very
prevent it?
important. Prevention is very important. So first understanding how the virus is transmitted,
Yes.
and then we have some very effective measures to prevent the disease. There's a very good vaccine against hepatitis B. We don't have drugs that are very good at getting rid of the virus completely, but we have a vaccine that can prevent people from getting infected in the first place. So it's very important that every child get that vaccine. Sometimes they
Up
need
to which year they should?
well, there's different recommendations, and the pediatricians know when to give the vaccine. Sometimes you need to give the vaccine at birth.
we talk about the Harvoni vaccine.
No, for hepatitis B.
Hepatitis B.
Hepatitis B. And that vaccine is very effective, if given correctly, to prevent the child from getting hepatitis B, and it also prevents against hepatitis D. So if every child in the country from now on gets effectively vaccinated, then there will be no more problem of B and D in the future.
Wow. So it
But
is
that won't help people who are already infected.
It is the case of the U.S. as a
In the
country?
United States, in most parts of the world, it is now recommended that.
Do we do here in Mongolia? Have you checked it?
So yes and no. One tries to do it, but unfortunately, sometimes there are cases where the vaccine may not have been given perfectly, and it does look like there's still been some transmission. But I think we can prevent that completely, and that's very important to do.
And I think probably we should study case by case where it was wrong, and so that make sure that every child has it in the right way.
Yes, and we know how to do that.
Do we have a program in Mongolia?
It's a matter of correct implementation.
Correct implementation.
That's what's important. And so fortunately, it's very impressive. Your government has taken a very strong initiative for this healthy liver program. And important parts of that include education, training, awareness, testing, and implementation of programs to treat people or prevent people from getting the disease. And that's very important, and I think government has set some very ambitious goals for eradication of some of these viruses in this country, and I think they're to be commended for that.
And it's, you think, possible? Eradication?
That's why I'm here.
Okay.
I do think, and I want to help in any small way that I can, but I think you have tremendous efforts here, and they are the correct efforts, and I think many people can help, and this is a tragic situation, but it's a fixable situation. And with the right partnerships, I think we can make huge differences in this country and elsewhere around the world.
Recently, I saw an interview with the State Secretary of Ministry of Health. I understand who had visited your school there, and who is now one of the key players of that healthy liver program. I mean, within which framework we talk about? Does it, if we eradicate all this liver disease, how long you think, say, we do the best within your plan? How long it will take time for Mongolia to completely eradicate this?
We'll have to see. I think there are programs in place to try to eradicate hepatitis C by 2020. We do have very effective treatments now, and there are even better treatments being developed. So there are going to be the right tools to achieve that.
Is it expensive things with?
Yes, so traditionally these drugs have been very expensive, and that is a problem because you develop an effective drug, it finally comes down to a country like Mongolia, and then you can't even afford it. So that is a problem that also needs to be addressed. There have been a lot of efforts to bring down the cost of those drugs for a place like Mongolia. It's still a burden, I think, the cost,
Yeah.
and still a barrier, but I think there are ways to...
It is worth at the end.
It is, and I think
We
we can
save
improve
lives.
that. I think we can bring better drugs at cheaper costs and cure more people.
And I was told also about another program where the United States Secretary had agreed or are working with you or your team for 5,000 medical employees who have themselves they have some problems with that habit.
That it is important to involve medical workers, and that sounds like a very good program. I'm not involved with that, but that's very important.
Now, just the very fact that the doctors themselves have this hepatitis, and it shows how much it is disseminated among population.
Yes, and even in my country, the liver specialists often don't even test for D. Now, of course, that's changing, and presumably it's also changing in this country.
My last question is, you have a very interesting life. You studied in Switzerland, grown up there, and then you involved in medicine. Looks like your passion. You have created so many important things for people, for better life, for a healthy life. Why you became a medical professional?
I think I love science, but I like applying science to come up with new treatments. And being a physician scientist allows me to marry both those interests. And there's nothing more exciting than to have a picture on your phone of the first patient in history to lose their virus due to a drug that you
Tell
developed.
us about who is this person.
And this is a patient in one of our studies in Turkey. And it's very exciting. It's with the drug that we hope to bring to Mongolia. And this is the thing that I discovered originally as a graduate student. So it takes a long time sometimes to bring something forward, but it's extremely rewarding to play any role in helping to make that happen. And of course, all this happens as a team. No one person can do it.
Yeah, scientists.
But scientists working together.
Okay.
And I think there's never been a better time in history than to bring science to solve problems. And so it's a fantastic time to be part of this process.
I wish your phone has full of Mongolian faces, so that you can watch hours and hours. And obviously this is our aim. And thank you for coming to Mongolia. Be my guest.
Thank
Because
you.
I want to explain to people what is behind that. Thank you very much.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. За хүндэтгэгчтэй өнөөдөр манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор энэ Монголд тэр нөгөө шар өвчний эсрэг тэмцэж байгаа ажиллаж байгаа энэ програмд оролцож байгаа Станфордын сургуулийн профессор Жэффри Глэнн оролцлоо. Их баярлалаа.